When I was around 4 or 5 years old, I came to a quiet realization I was getting old. That moment taught me something profound. Aging is really about simplifying your life and expressing care in a more intentional way. Today, I want to discuss how to face aging with composure rather than anxiety. So first, how do we actually define old age? There are three frameworks worth considering: the socio-cultural definition, the medical definition, and the personal or subjective experience of aging. From a socio-cultural standpoint, many societies consider people young until the age of 65. In fact, under certain classification systems, you're officially categorized as a young person right up until that point. In Korea, for example, retirement ages differ by profession. Workers in manufacturing may retire around 55, while university professors often continue until 65. But medically speaking, aging begins much earlier, around age 20. Think about Olympic gold medalists. Most are in their early 20s. That's when the human body reaches its physical peak. From that point forward, the aging process quietly begins. The sharp cutoff points we associate with becoming old are largely social constructs, not biological realities. This is why the real goal isn't to stop aging. It's to slow it down, living in moderation, maintaining consistent habits, getting adequate rest, eating regularly, and avoiding harmful substances like alcohol and tobacco. All of these are strategies for decelerating the natural aging process. We teach children these habits early, not just for their present health, but as a long-term investment in graceful aging. That S.O. When exactly did I personally come to terms with my own aging? I can pinpoint the exact moment. For years, my daily routine was relentless. I'd leave home by 6 a.m., hold meetings from 6:30, see patients throughout the morning, host a radio program on KBS from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, return to clinic, and continue appointments until the evening. I repeated this cycle without fatigue, without physical strain, and without a second thought. Then one afternoon, after finishing a broadcast, I needed to descend the staircase quickly. There was no time to wait for the elevator. I was wearing my distance glasses and wasn't paying close attention to the steps below me. Suddenly I stumbled. I nearly fell an entire floor down the central staircase. Confused, I visited an ophthalmologist. It turned out I had developed presbyopia, a condition where the eyes gradually lose the ability to shift focus quickly between near and far distances. I also discovered I had floaters, tiny specks that drift through your field of vision, caused by age-related changes in the eye's lens. When I looked at bright surfaces, I could see small floating shapes. That was the moment it became undeniable. My eyes were aging. And if my eyes were changing, the rest of my body was too. From that day forward, I made a firm personal rule. I never rush down a staircase. I'll walk upstairs, but going down, I always take my time. That single decision cut my pace in half. And I was completely at peace with that. Once I accepted that my body was changing, I didn't resist it or push through it. Instead, I made a deliberate, structured decision to reduce the intensity of my professional life. I canceled early morning breakfast appointments. I cut back on broadcasts. I stepped back from several hospital commitments. Everything was trimmed down systematically and calmly. The result? I began sleeping in without an alarm. I ate meals at a relaxed pace. I enjoyed a glass of wine before dinner. Life became quieter, and I embraced that. Now, this kind of decision isn't easy for most people. The primary obstacle is greed, not in a moral sense, but in the sense of attachment to productivity, income, and status. Many people acknowledge that aging is universal, yet continue living at a pace that their body can no longer sustain. My perspective is straightforward. The purpose of earning money is to support your family, care for your parents, and meet your needs. Once you fulfill those responsibilities and reach a reasonable financial threshold, continuing to sacrifice your health for additional income is simply not a worthwhile trade. When I reached that threshold, letting go wasn't difficult. It felt natural. And that sense of ease, I believe, comes from having clear personal values and knowing when enough truly is enough. After stepping back professionally, the next major area I had to address was relationships. Because here's the reality. As your professional life shrinks, so does your social circle. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. What matters in retirement is having genuine companions. People to hike with, play golf with, share a meal with. Not business contacts or strategic connections, but friends whose company you actually enjoy. As my work commitments decreased, I naturally let go of relationships that were primarily transactional. People I met through work or those I maintained contact with for professional reasons. Sustaining those connections requires enormous energy, and when the professional context disappears, so does the motivation. My guiding principle for relationships is simple. Never mix money into personal friendships. I don't handle household finances myself. That's my wife's domain. Within my personal allowance, I manage small expenses, but I don't lend money, borrow money, or allow financial transactions to enter my personal relationships. This single rule eliminates the most common source of conflict between friends and family. Beyond money, the other key to healthy relationships as you age is lowering your expectations. Not in a cynical way, but in an honest one. Consider this. Most of us struggle to keep the promises we make to ourselves. We set goals, exercise daily, quit smoking, eat better, and we fall short. If we can't fully deliver on our own commitments, why would we hold others to a higher standard? When expectations are realistic, disappointment becomes rare. And when disappointment is rare, relationships remain peaceful. And my wife often asks me, doesn't that bother you? When someone cancels plans or behaves inconsiderately. Honestly, it usually doesn't. This is indifference. It's a philosophy I developed over years of self-reflection and reading. The great thinkers and sages whose words have endured through centuries consistently offer the same wisdom. As you grow older, simplify your relationships. I sometimes reference Confucius as an example. He lived to approximately 74 years old, remarkably long for someone living around 500 BC. His teachings about life's stages resonate deeply with me. At 40, he described a clarity of purpose. At 50, an understanding of life's natural limits. At 60, an ability to receive criticism without being rattled. At 70, a freedom to follow one's own heart without violating moral boundaries. That final stage, acting freely within ethical limits at 70, makes perfect sense when you think about it. By that age, what motivation would someone have to break the law or violate social norms? The greed and ambition that drive such behavior in youth have largely faded. Most people over 70 simply want peace, health, and meaningful connection. I'm approaching 70 now, and I notice these shifts within myself. The ambitions that once felt urgent feel smaller. What remains is what actually matters. Of all the factors that determine the quality of your later years, relationships, finances, purpose, health is undeniably the most fundamental. Without it, nothing else functions properly. But here's an important caution. Don't become obsessive about health management, especially if you're starting late. Many people ignore their health entirely until their 60s, then suddenly attempt to correct decades of poor habits all at once. Losing weight, quitting smoking, reducing alcohol, managing stress. While all of these corrections are necessary, the mindset that a hospital or medical intervention can fix everything is problematic. Health isn't something you outsource to a clinic. The most effective approach is to build healthy habits in your 30s and 40s, so that by the time you reach your 60s, your body has been operating on a reasonable foundation for decades. If you neglected your health until retirement, then use that transition as an opportunity to completely restructure your lifestyle, your sleep, your diet, your movement, your stress levels. On the biological side, there are interesting gender differences worth understanding. Women on average live longer than men, and this is largely tied to hormones. Estrogen, produced during a woman's reproductive years, offers cardiovascular protection and improves stress adaptation. These benefits contribute to lower rates of heart disease and arterial hardening during those years. Men, by contrast, produce androgens. As testosterone levels decline with age, men can experience emotional shifts, including increased tearfulness and reduced physical vitality. Accepting this hormonal transition, rather than fighting it artificially, is, in my view, the healthier path. That if there's one non-negotiable step in preparing for old age, it's retirement. Specifically, retiring at the right time and retiring well. I've observed two individuals in Korea who, in my opinion, have aged most gracefully. Both retired at appropriate times, made deliberate plans for what came next, and have gone on to live deeply fulfilling lives well into their later decades. One of them, a professor I greatly admire, made a conscious plan upon retiring. If I have 15 years ahead of me, how do I want to use them? He spent those years lecturing, writing, mentoring, and engaging with the world. The 2 decades since his retirement, he has said, were the most productive and meaningful of his life. I witnessed this personally at a wedding. He delivered a heartfelt congratulatory speech, then had to repeat it at a different location when the outdoor ceremony was disrupted by rain. Every word, every nuance, every detail was consistent. His memory and presence were remarkable. He walked without a cane and spoke standing. That is aging with dignity. The lesson is clear. Retirement isn't an ending. When approached thoughtfully, it's the beginning of a chapter defined by freedom, intention, and genuine fulfillment. Old age is inevitable, but an unhappy old age is not. So what does happiness actually consist of? This question is surprisingly difficult to answer directly. Happiness resists simple definition. But a Harvard psychiatrist named Professor George Vaillant spent decades studying exactly this question. The research originated with a remarkable donation to Harvard University. Following the death of a wealthy American businessman in 1939, a man who had built his fortune through a chain of dime stores, the predecessors of today's discount retailers, his estate made a donation to university with a specific request: research the conditions for happiness. I built a successful life, the sentiment went, but I never fully understood what happiness is. Harvard responded by launching one of the longest-running longitudinal studies in history. Beginning in 1939, researchers tracked hundreds of students across their entire lives, interviewing them every 2 to 3 years, analyzing their health and finances, and ultimately asking, "Were you happy?" The study ran until approximately 2010. Its findings were published by Professor Vaillant. From hundreds of tracked variables, 7 consistent characteristics emerged among those who reported genuine happiness. 4 were health-related, and 3 were relational. The single most powerful predictor of happiness was a stable, secure marriage. People in loving, committed relationships were consistently happier than those who were divorced and alone, and even those in unsatisfied marriages fared better when they found a compatible partner than those who remained isolated. The second factor was lifelong learning, not formal academic credentials, but a consistent habit of reading, absorbing new ideas, and engaging intellectually with the world. People who continued learning throughout their lives reported significantly higher levels of happiness, regardless of age. The remaining conditions, rooted in health, purpose, and connection, paint a consistent picture. Happiness is not a destination you arrive at. It's a way of living that you build deliberately and daily across the full arc of your life.